Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacalyn. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacalyn at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. I'm the president, I'm the founder, and the chief listening officer here at our network, where we currently have 29 live weekly broadcasts. Our show today is The Wise Ones, and joining me is my co-host and friend. He's also my book coach. He is quite accomplished, and every show I just get more and more overwhelmed thinking about all the things that he has accomplished in his life, and he always shows up. He's the true professional, and he's the consummate gentleman. Let's welcome red.olaughlin, and then we'll bring out our guests. Hi, Red.
Hi there. Hi, Dr. Jacalyn. You got a beautiful smile again today, but I got to ask you one question first. Are you going to change outfits every time you come on the air today?
Well, I changed. This matches our background. So earlier today, I was wearing pink.
But the show we were on recently, every time I turned around, you were in a different outfit.
I know. That's show business, right?
You got to do what you got to do, right?
For sure, definitely. So, Red, you have a number of things that are similar to our guest who's joining us, and he's coming back for more. He was on the corner bookstore. His name is Pat Daly. But before we bring him out, I want to spotlight you. And if you can give our first-time viewers and listeners an overview of who you are and some of the fabulous things that you've accomplished, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Jacalyn. Really appreciate your time. Author, speaker, writer, publisher. Those are the primary things that I do nowadays. Long time ago, high school, my first love was chemistry. I didn't get a chance to practice it because I got an invitation to Vietnam. However, nowadays, I use my chemistry background to research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating symptoms. So I take my passion, which is looking into the human body, and what accelerates this, what slows this down, what can we do about these things? And when you look at how things work, it's amazing how we can sometimes, if you do this, it stops it. If you do this, it slows it down. If you do this, it speeds it up. So don't do whatever it is to speed it up. But there's just a lot of things there. So that's my passion in life today. I write about it. I kind of specialize in longevity and age-related diseases. I speak about it quite often on the USA Global TV and radio network. I have a show called Talking Heads that occurs immediately following this show here, The Wise Ones. And I spend a little bit of time. This next series of talks are on post-pandemic health. What can we do to be in our best possible healthy shape, wellness-wise, fitness-wise, every way, emotionally, mentally? What does it take to get there after this pandemic is over? And let's see what else. I think it's about time that we get over to Mr. Pat Daly and start learning about him. Don't you think, Dr. Jacalyn?
Yes, Red, thank you so much. So Pat Daly is an author, and he's an author of Spark. He's also an engineer and a former Air Force test pilot, and he's going to be speaking with us about his book and also about his experience. And as I mentioned, I think you two have a number of things in common. So let's welcome Pat Daly to the show. Hi, Pat.
Hey, everybody. Dr. Jacalyn, Red. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you with us. Thanks for being here, and thanks for coming back. As I mentioned, you were on the corner bookstore, and people can watch that interview over on our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio. Tell us about the journey that you've had in your career and how it's led to writing.
Okay. Well, I always loved to read when I was a kid, and I early on got bit by the sci-fi bug. And somewhat like Red was talking about his background, that early love pointed me in a certain direction. It pointed me towards technical fields. It pointed me to, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go to the moon, do all these other cool things. And so I followed that path through an Air Force career, became a test pilot, tried to become an astronaut, tried a couple of times to become an astronaut, and failed at that. But it was one of those things where it's hard to feel bad about failing, because you look at the people that get selected and holy cow, are they great human beings, brilliant people, kind people, wise people. And so it was hard to feel too bad about that. But then when I decided that I'd had my last shot at that, it was time to look for something else to do. So I went to work for American Airlines briefly, and then the universe seemed to have a different goal for me, and I got furloughed from American Airlines, which is just a fancy word for laid off. It feels a little different, but it was eye-opening, because all these years that I'd had all this loyalty towards my employer, to the country, to the Air Force, all this stuff, and one day wiped away because no longer trustworthy. I had to be walked out of the airport, and I thought that was the most humiliating thing. And so then I started working in human spaceflight for Honeywell. Worked down at Johnson Space Center for a number of years, and then one of the things about that is that it moves very, very slowly, and I just like to move a little faster. And so after about 10 years with Honeywell, I launched my own business, did that for 15 years. And now I'm back in the flight test world, and writing books and loving it.
What an interesting journey. And by the way, I can envision, and I know that's happened to people, there's no reason, and they have to walk you out. They actually stand in your office watching you pack your stuff, and then they have to escort you out of the building, and you've been there for years giving everything. It's just insane. But thank you for that transparency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it. Red.
I've related to it more than once myself. So it's, the first time it was, it's really kind of strange, weird. After that, it's expected. And I had a couple of people there says, I'm going to be here for 4 or 5 hours. You're welcome to sit down. They said, I'll come back, catch you later. And the people, and they're just as embarrassed to walk you out as you are to be there. And it's different, I guess, if you get hired and you're only there a year and you bumped around a couple of places, but you've been in that building 20 years. That's kind of weird when they treat you that. And ironically, this is something the people they let go first are maybe not the optimal performers compared to the overall. I know when I worked for a particular oil field service company, I was brought in, I had 24 people. I hired up to 49. By the time I got let go, I had 3. And so it's just, you see everything. And I had just a policy. I said, if I know there's something going on, I can't tell you. I had a staff meeting every week. I said, if I can't tell you something, something's going on. If I tell you I don't know anything, then I don't know anything. And it just seemed to put them at ease, because they had something that they could rail on. So if we had 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know anything. Okay, fine. Everything just went back to normal. But it's still it's a crazy environment to live in, that you don't know whether you're going to be at work next week.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's stressful. You don't know if you need to put your house on the market, or polish up your resume, or, think about retirement, or just take the dog for a walk. It's
well, is it more stressful than flying a brand new airplane that hasn't been flown before?
Yes. Yes. Brand new airplanes, you'd spend a lot of time studying them. And the ones I flew anyway, you always had the what we would call the nylon letdown option, where if things go really, really bad, you can eject, and then you parachute your way towards the ground. But there's no parachute in corporate America. Well, I mean, there are some people that have the golden parachute, but for most of us, we're at the beck and call of the company, and got to do our best, and then sometimes just got to move on.
Did you have any simulators that you were able to fly before you actually got in the seat?
Sometimes you would fly things that were similar in a simulator or in the actual aircraft. Like for the F-15, for example, the F-15 flies a lot like an F-4. Now, a little higher performance, a little cooler stuff, but they were both built by McDonnell Douglas, really similar handling characteristics. So flying an F-4 was really good preparation for flying an F-15. Flying an F-16, on the other hand, was you could mess around with engineering simulators and feel the incredible responsiveness of the aircraft, and it was still nothing like getting into the airplane and feeling the kick in the seat and just the ultimate responsiveness of that airplane to your thoughts.
My dad was an aviation pilot. He got his Navy pilot wings when he was a second class machinist mate, enlisted pilot. And he flew 77 different kinds of aircraft, jets, helicopters, multi-engine seaplanes. And he was a test pilot for a short period of time. And one of the 2 or 3 conversations, I said, well, how do you fly a plane that you've never flown before? And he says, a lot of times they had another plane right next to him on the runway. And you were just basically, when he was ready to, you had communications back and forth. And they basically had a buddy next to him, literally, even though you're in a different aircraft, but it was just kind of that extra safety factor that you had there. I don't know. We don't do that nowadays, but I know back then they did.
Yeah. My first flight in an A7, actually, there was someone right there next to me chasing me along, and he'd flown the A7 before, so it was all good. But for me, all brand new.
My dad, one of the stories I love to tell was the Blue Angels came to Corpus Christi, Texas, in probably around 54, 53 timeframe. And one of his good friends died in California. He borrowed the number 7 Blue Angel jet, flew it to California for the funeral, got it back before the end of the air show. He had trained during the Korean War. He was a jet instructor in Alameda, California, and he had trained I won't say most of the Blue Angels, but the CO of the Blue Angels was one of his students. But nowadays you don't do something like that. But
No.
back then it was pretty. He was flying out of Puerto Rico and brought back a dog, and they had to tape an oxygen mask because he was sitting literally on my dad's lap. So my dad had an oxygen mask, and there was another one that was a makeshift. So just a lot of little things you do back then you don't even think about doing nowadays.
Yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah, we keep evolving. That's a good thing. Pat, I'd love for you to share with us about your book, Spark. What do you want people to take away from reading it?
Okay. As far as take away from reading it, I think it's the importance of play in life, because sometimes we poo-poo people that play games, or whether it's video games or games on the phone. But I think there's an incredible reward to playing. It's a chance to divorce yourself a little bit from the soul-sucking tyranny of your day-to-day existence, if you will, and replace it with something that is fun. Now, it may replace one stress with another stress, because sometimes playing games can be stressful, and yet we don't react to it the same way. It's a different kind of stress. It's been called eustress, which is a positive stress on your brain and body, as opposed to distress, which is, has a negative impact. I mean, I think if you think about going for a run, that's all good. Stresses you out physically, maybe relaxes you mentally. But if you're running from some crazed madman with a knife, then that's not the same kind of positive stress. It's a different world out there. So play, I think, is one aspect of it, and then maybe another aspect of the book is that the world is not necessarily the friendly, safe environment that we all wish it were, and so we have to maintain a bit of vigilance and learn from doing.
Pat, I noticed on your book cover, Spark, you have very interesting book cover, by the way, but you have a maze-like figure.
Mm-hmm.
And does that add to the stress of opening the book and where are you at in this maze? Is that sort of what was that in your background when you came up with that, or is that accidental or what?
No, it's very deliberate to put that maze on there, and it was because within Spark, within the world of Spark, the Solar Prime augmented reality park, gaming theme park, if you will, there are things that aren't advertised. There are things you can do, things you can learn. And to a certain extent, it's like a maze. You have to continue to go and go, but you don't necessarily know what's at the end of the maze. And so that adding that maze was deliberate, as was trying to make the maze look a little bit electronic, as a nod to the artificial intelligence and world of the future that I try to create.
What prompted the creativity to go in that particular direction? You have a game playing background, or your kids, or whatever?
A little of both. A little of both. I've always, early on, when computer games became a reality, they were mostly text-based. And so you would have to read what it says and then type in your response and go from there. And now it is so much different, so much more expansive, that I've evolved to console kind of gaming, PlayStation and Xbox. So I do those kind of things as well. And then what really got me into this idea was I have two daughters, and both my daughters at the time were playing a game called Pokemon Go. And the way Pokemon Go works is of course, you have an app. So you fire up your app, and then your app shows you your camera's view of the world. And as you're walking around, these little Pokemon jump up on your screen, and they're not really there. Even though you're seeing the yard and the sidewalk and everything on your phone, these Pokemon exist only in the virtual world. And I thought that is a really cool idea, to be able to superimpose the virtual over the real, which really is kind of the opposite of what you're doing right now, Red. I mean, we've got a real image of you superimposed over a virtual background. So it really looks like you're in this beautiful forest, but we know you're not. But we don't really know where you are. We don't know what your real background might look like. You could be on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So anyway, I started playing this game because my daughters were, and that's what prompted the idea for this kind of theme park that would use that technology to create a blended true and virtual environment.
Interesting. This is your second book, right?
This is actually the first nonfiction book I wrote, or first fiction book. Sorry, I wrote a nonfiction book a few years ago, and it was all about aviation safety. But this is my first fiction endeavor.
So this is really your first breakout from everything I've written has always been of the nonfiction variety, how to do this, whatever it may happen to be. I did take a NaNoWriMo thing, and I wrote 24 hours in the life of a particular flight that I had that we went on. And it was a very, very successful flight against some Russian submarine. And it was just, I wanted to kind of capture what was going on, because and I kind of combined several different flights because it's impossible to get all the different parameters with each one. But it was one of those kind of really special flights where you get relieved by this super electronic P3 that has everything in the world that we could only dream of. And so we get out there, we identify where he's at, course, speed, depth, and then we turn it over and exit on, and we never know anything more about it. But the thing that happened to me on that particular flight was a real world occasion of Red October, where they did the crazy Ivan maneuver. Here I am tracking this Russian submarine along, oblivious to the world, getting ready for next. Everything's going on, but next patterns in the water. Got 3 or 4 hours before the guy shows up. Everything's fine. You're getting ready to turn it over. All of a sudden, the guy makes a U-turn, and I'm here we're in the last 30 minutes. I can't drop anything. I can't communicate. I mean, we're out there in the middle of nowhere, 1,000 miles from land. And it's just, what do you do? The guy's turned around. Well, fortunately, he turned back around. And I guess the story was the fact that, okay, he turned around. The other aircraft knew all the buoys. We had no water. They followed the plot. They knew what happened. But I didn't know at that time. And it was just Panic City. But, a lot of times when you fly, you have Panic City.
Yep.
We had a lot of long flights, but my shortest flight was probably my most panic driven one. I don't know. Have you ever had a 0.1 flight?
Yeah.
We had a 0.1 flight with a fire on takeoff.
Very similar. Was that in a P3?
Yeah, an engine fire on takeoff just before liftoff. So they were already beyond refusal. They had to take off. Yeah. And so you're able to turn around, land, and in the meantime, you hit the fire extinguishers, you feather the engine and, come right back. Heavyweight landings. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was actually in an old model F4 and F4C, which used a thing called boundary layer control, which blew hot air over the wing to help with, keeping the boundary layer attached, producing more lift, all that good stuff. But when you raised the flaps, if boundary layer control did not shut off, then you were just moments away from a major fire. So I took off, lit the afterburners, then took off and broke ground, raised the gear up, raised the flats and slats and flaps, and then boom, the light comes on, and in an F4, you got plenty of thrust, plenty of gas, and I just pitched up to the overhead, came back around and landed. It probably wasn't even 3 minutes. But yeah, at all those flights, I clearly remember that one.
Yeah, I've had some very good flights. I've gone to very interesting places, Bora Bora being one of them. But the ones that seem to be more panic-stricken, that usually involve fire inside or outside the aircraft, those are the ones that have a tendency to sear that thought into the brain.
Yeah.
So what airplanes did you actually fly?
Most of my time is in F4s and F-16s, but I've got a bunch of other time in fighters, A-7s, F-15, F-18, of course, all the T series, T-37, T-38, T-2, T-6, and then some of the bigger stuff as well, like a B-52 and a KC-135, which is a military version of a 707. And then one of the most odd things I ever flew, though, was the Goodyear blimp. And what a hoot that was. It's not really a cockpit. You're in this gondola, and the control panel reminded me more of a pipe organ in a church than it did of a regular cockpit. Because you're pulling all these knobs to reshape the balloon, the hull, to generate lift and turning. And so it was kind of like sitting in a minivan and just having these things to pull to reshape the bag. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, only other experiences I have that are worth noting, I flew an OH-6A Cayuse helicopter. My dad was working for Hughes Aircraft at the time, and his boss took me out, and we did a bunch of stuff up and down the California coast. And then I was over in Montijo, Portugal, and I got a flight in an Atlantique. It was on my birthday, so they felt compelled to let me sit up there and fly the aircraft for a while. That was kind of interesting. But beyond that, no, most of my time is in P3s, nearly 1,000 flights, actually.
Oh, yeah. And in that airplane, that's a lot of hours.
It's a lot of hours. Now, some of them, are very short because they're logistics runs here, there, and yonder. But most of my missions are 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But different world nowadays.
It is. And they're aren't they doing that mission? I know there's some P3s still flying.
P8 took over. It's basically a 737-800 that has been configured for military requirements, Bombay and all the rest of that stuff. Because the P3 used to be the Lockheed Electra that they took 10 feet out of for a Bombay door and stuff. But anyway, It's the mission's still there. It's a totally you're flying still on the Russian submarines. My son has a lot more in-depth knowledge because of where he's at as a contractor with communications with the military and the Navy in particular. And what we used to do is we never talked to anybody. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk to the tower. You flash a light and you take off. And other times you sit out there on the tarmac and you simulate a flight as if you were flying, because we had Russian AGI trawlers around where we were, and we didn't want them to know whether we really did take off or didn't take off or whatever. And so you're doing position reports as if you're 500 miles away. I mean, it's crazy things back during the Cold War. But anyway, we did a lot of things. But the P-8 is taking over that mission. It doesn't have the same capability, but I see in the future probably will far solve it. But they have areas that they are much better in, but areas that they don't have the same magnetic anomaly detection, for instance. We could get down 200 feet off the water and you could pick up the metal of the submarine and know exactly where you were. So when you wanted to put a torpedo in the water, you made your final mad run, you get that little swing of the magnetic anomaly, you 2 seconds, pop it out on the right-hand side, boom, the torpedo is exactly where it needed to be when it went active. But they don't do that. For what reasons? I guess they probably have better technology. They don't need that particular sensor anymore. I have no idea. I've never actually been in one. It's one of those things I look forward to doing one of these days. But so what actually got you involved with writing? I mean, that's we talk about authors here periodically. We talk about a lot of entrepreneurs, but what actually got you in the writing bug, and in particular into fiction?
Well, I I had the idea about the virtual reality game park, and so I thought, oh, that would be really cool, really cool. Somebody ought to write this book. And so I started noodling it over a little bit, and I came up with what I thought was a great plot. And then one night while I was out at dinner with my lovely wife, I was kind of pitching the book to her. Now, for context, she is a 4th grade teacher. And so she deals with terrible writing all the time. And she starts pinging me, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And I may have reacted poorly. So that was kind of like, she threw the gauntlet down, and it was, okay, well, if you're really going to do this, then really do it. And you'll have to think your way through all of these writing challenges. And I did. And when I got the first draft finished, I was convinced it was the next great American novel. And then I had some people read it, and I found out just how terrible it was. But God bless them. I mean, I had good writing groups, good friends who gave me good feedback, and 8 versions later, the book ends up getting published. So I'm either too dumb to know when to quit or stubborn enough to stick with it to finish the book. But got it done, and now I'm nearly done with the second book.
Before we go to break, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, let's bring up your website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Before
Is
you
that
go
okay
to
with you?
Before you go to break, I get 2 questions about your writing there. Number one, Feral Daughter is one of the main characters. How did you come up with that name?
We were on a family vacation in Spain, and jet lagging. We're over there we're wandering through a market, and I just had market overload. So I go outside to just clear my head a little bit. And as my wife and daughters exit the market, I thought I heard my daughter say, "Feral daughter." And I don't remember what she actually said at the time. And at the time, she was studying fashion merchandising at Baylor University. And I turned around and looked at her and I said, "Christy, that would be a brilliant name for a boutique. You could sell counterculture kind of clothes. You could, the stuff your parents don't want you to wear." And she said, "What are you talking about, Dad?" I said, "Feral daughter." She said, "What do you mean?" said, well, didn't you just say feral daughter? She goes, no, Dad. I said, whatever. But the name stuck with me. And so when I developed this character for the book, I wanted her to have an avatar name, and I wanted a name that kind of told people a little bit about what to expect. And so feral daughter was born again as a book character.
Second question. When you write, I write in Microsoft Word, but I know there's some special software when you start having numerous characters in different locations and times. And do you have any special software that you used in order to write your book, or was it all done just in a word processing?
It was all in Microsoft Word, although I've been tempted to try Scrivener because I have another author friend who swears by Scrivener. And I'm just hesitant to try it, but maybe for book number 3, I'll do that.
I've used Scrivener off and on for some stuff, and I was using it not necessarily for the benefit of writing fiction, but for the benefit of being able to publish a particular document in a different format. And that was very helpful to me as a publisher. And so I was using it, but not necessarily as it's intended. But there's a lot better and more tutorials on it now than there was 5 years ago when I was using it.
Uh-huh.
I brought up your website here. I'm going to go over here on the website. So tell us a little bit about the design and where I should go while I'm over here.
Okay. The design was supposed to evoke a memory of the cover of the book, or to feed back to that. So you got the spark in the middle, and then the little lines radiating out are supposed to look like the etching that is done on integrated circuits. So I wanted that to be brought to mind. So up in on the top banner, you got About Pat. That's just my bio there, and then About Spark, media, contact information. Yeah, pretty standard bio. Live in Houston with my wife and dogs and cats, and within easy reach of one daughter anyway. The other one we're trying to convince to move back to Texas, but have not succeeded yet.
Not the feral daughter.
Nope.
And Pat, you're the director of safety for Berry Aviation?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's what I do for my day-to-day job.
Fabulous. Okay, let's go over to About Spark.
This is the one where I saw the cover of the book. I thought I had seen the cover of the book there. Maybe I didn't. There it is.
Yep. And I need to this is good to review the website, because now I know I need to replace that image, because that's not the current cover.
Yeah, it is funny when we go look at our own websites, isn't it? It's like, oh, I should have changed that date, or that person's not, whatever it is. But yeah, okay. So let's go on to media. Do you have any appearances coming up that you want anyone to know about?
Not immediately, because we're in a really, really busy time at work. So I'm trying to minimize that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope to maybe come and visit y'all again when book 2 hits the streets.
Now
Perfect.
you did go to Comic-Con, didn't you?
Comic Palooza.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the two events?
Location, really. They're both very similar in terms of, it's not just about comics. It's about cosplay. It's about role playing. It's about gaming, in either the tabletop version or virtual reality kind of gaming. And then there is a huge market, not just for comic books, but for science fiction and fantasy related art, related collectibles. Like this past year, there were more little baby Yoda figurines than I thought could exist on one planet. But it seemed like nearly everyone was selling them, and nearly everyone that walked past our booth was carrying one. So clearly, Baby Yoda was the way to go, was the thing to bet on for for Comic Palooza vendors this year. So, I mean, Comic Palooza, Comic Con, really very similar. What tends to be a little different is some of the celebrity guests you get, because Comic Con, that's the biggie. That's the mothership of comic, sci-fi, fantasy conventions. And so they have a little more luck gathering some of the big names like like Chris Pine, from the new Star Trek generation, or Chris Pratt. There seem to be a lot of Chris's in science fiction now. Chris Hemsworthy, the guy that plays Thor. So a lot of Chris's out there in the sci-fi world. And then sometimes you get some of the throwback guests. I don't think William Shatner's doing them anymore, but Katie Sackhoff is out there doing them, and she first came to my attention in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and now she's gone on and done a bunch of other things as well. So, yeah, that's kind of the vibe at the two comic conventions.
Do you have a costume you wear, or are you just incognito in mufti?
I'm in semi mufti. I have a T-shirt that I wear that says author on the front. And that's as much to remind me as anything else, because sometimes it's my favorite thing to put on if I'm going to write, because it reminds me this is what I'm doing. I can Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite authors, says his technique is when he sits down to write, he gives himself permission to write or to do nothing. But when he's sitting there to write, he cannot allow himself to do anything else. So he doesn't pull out his phone. He won't even do a plank. It's just all about writing or nothing, which for me is writing or thinking about what I want to write. So sometimes the little reminder of the shirt that I'm wearing helps me.
You have some future. You mentioned book number 3. Book number 2 is your first nonfiction fiction book. Where do you see your future in the fiction and nonfiction world?
I will probably stick with fiction. I started another nonfiction book a couple of years ago, and it was we had tentatively titled it "Mental Debris." And the subtitle was "How to Take Out the Trash That's Occupying Your Brain." And it was all about resilience and mental housekeeping. And I had paired up with a clinical psychologist, and I thought we had a great outline for the book and where we were going to go. But for whatever reason, they just didn't buy into the book project. I think they were far more interested in seeing and treating patients than they were to spend the time and the work writing the book. So that's kind of on the shelf. Maybe I'll get back to that someday. But I do have a third and final book in the Spark series planned. I've already started working on it a little bit, not very far along, but that's where that will go. And then I want to wrap that up because I want to move on to other ideas and other worlds, other universes in my crazed science fiction brain.
You had mentioned that you and your family were over in Spain for a while. Any other great places in the world that you've had the opportunity to travel?
Yeah, we've been pretty much all over Europe, and I'd say of all of our European travels, probably Italy is number one, and then Ireland and Northern Ireland are number 2, and then in a previous job, I was traveling to Japan all the time, and I absolutely love Japan in terms of a clean environment. It is maybe the cleanest place on the planet. You never see litter in the streets. In fact, I was walking out of the train station in Nagoya, and I was wearing a raincoat because it gets kind of cold and rainy in Nagoya in the winter. And apparently I had worn this coat last when I was walking my dogs. And so I had an unused dog bag in my pocket. And as I'm walking along, I'm searching for my ID badge or something. And I pull my hand out of the pocket with the ID badge in it. And unknowingly, I had dropped this doggy bag on the street. Well, 30 seconds later, there's this wonderful Japanese lady running up to me, saying, excuse me, you dropped this. And okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tucked it back in my pocket, and it ended up back in the States with me eventually. But that's not something that you would see happen on the streets of Houston or New York. So I'd say those are probably my favorite places that we've visited.
I want to know, Pat, do you have a special pen that you use when you do your signings?
No.
No.
Early in my life, my adult life, I guess, I realized that I, for whatever reason, I'm congenitally incapable of keeping up with two things. Thing number one is a pen. So now I buy pens in the 100 pack from Staples or something, the cheapest pens that if I lose them, I don't care. And then the other thing I'm incapable of keeping up with are sunglasses. I don't know why, but I have a tendency to put them down and then walk away from them. So it's cheap sunglasses, cheap pens, and I'm good to go.
I love that. Thank you.
The man who knows his limits.
Well, we saw in the news about King Charles III and his pen not writing, I think 2 different times. So you got to have a whole bunch of pens with you. This way you don't have to rely on one.
Yeah. Well, I imagine, though, he's got people that
and
are there to hand him a new pen if that one doesn't work. So maybe that's what I need. I need people. Do y'all have people when you go out in public appearances? Somebody to hand you a new pen?
No. I have to laugh. I did a book signing at the Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. We had an event there for a charity. And anyway, it was a horrible day. The weather was wind whipping and the rain and the tablecloth wouldn't stay on. And it was just a disaster. And I thought, book signings are not as glamorous as I thought they were going to be.
Well, I tell you, with COVID, you're away from everything, so you're not doing it as much as you used to. And I just went to a couple, and I didn't have a pen on me because it wasn't one of those things. I used to do always. I had them in the car, I had them everywhere. Now all of a sudden, okay, I got my books covered, walking. I don't have a pen, and so I go around. And somebody has 3 or 4. I says, "Can I borrow one for the event?" And they're always good about allowing me to do that. I said, "I promise, I'll bring it back." It's just a cheap pen, but still the same. I returned it, but yes, there's something about. We all leave something out of our brain when things happen, and it just you've identified it. I don't think I have locked into one individual thing yet. There's still multiple things rattling around that I forget.
Well, Pat, I've really enjoyed this interview, and thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. What is the best way for people to purchase your book? We've got the link here somewhere. I'll find it. Here it is, to order your book, Spark. And how would you like people to contact you if they have questions, they want to reach out to you?
Sure. Probably best way is through my website. We've got a contact form there, and that website is thepatdaily.com. And so, reach out to me that way. I'm also up on Goodreads as an author. So if you wanted to drop me a line there or ask me a question, that works as well.
Okay. thepatdaily.com. Daily is spelled D-A-I-L-Y for those people in our radio audience. So just making that extra clear. So it's thepatdaily, DAILY.com.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Fred.
And because you're in Houston, I look forward to meeting you one of these days. Get together.
Oh, yes.
When you have,
we'll have to get together for a coffee or something.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I love when people connect in person. That's great. Yeah. How far apart are you?
I don't know. I'm in Cyprus.
I'm in the Sugar Land area.
Okay. Yeah, so we're kind of on the same
Yeah.
side of the giant metroplex.
Yeah, so probably about 50 miles.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, half of 50 is 25. There you go. Well, thank you again, Pat. And please do go over to our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio, and spread the word that your audience can watch it over there, as well as many of the other platforms. But that's my favorite.
And we look
Will
forward
do.
to when you have the next book done to come back and let us know more about Feral Daughter.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much for having me on here. Really appreciate it. Dr. Jacalyn and Red, it's been great.
No.
Thank
Likewise,
you. It was a
Pat.
pleasure. Nice seeing you again.
Nice to see you too. All right.
Bye now.
Bye for
Bye-bye.
now. Well, I really enjoyed that. I have to apologize. We had a major storm. The wind was pelting with the rain. I had to go downstairs and make sure everything was all right. So thank you for carrying on, Mr. red.olaughlin. How can
And-
people reach out to you? And just remind us again, what will you be speaking on right after this on your Talking Head show?
I'm doing a series right now on post-pandemic health. What can we do now to be prepared when somebody says the pandemic's over, and it actually is over, and we're not losing hundreds of people a day in new cases or anything else, that our vaccines are actually working as a vaccine, that we don't need booster shots, that we're not seeing people load the hospitals or die, that pandemic is big red marked crest, it's done. So that's what we're talking about now. What can we do now to get ourselves ready so that when the pandemic is officially over, we are way ahead of our peers who are really not preparing for a post-pandemic world? And so that's where I'm at. I'm about in the middle of that. I think episode 3 or 4, I think 3 today, if I remember right. Regardless, that's what I'll be on. That's at about 11 minutes, I guess, on Talking Heads on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And reach me easy, red.olaughlin.com. I have a banner with all my information in there, email and phone numbers. But red like the color, R-E-D, O'Laughlin spelled OLAUGHLIN.com, red.olaughlin.com.
Thank you, Red. And I'll let you go over to the other studio, and I'll be there in just a minute.
I look forward to you joining me over there. Take care. Thank you again.
Bye. Now. And thank you to each and every one of you for watching our shows or listening to our shows, whether it's on the radio or a podcast platform or here on one of our TV stations. We're just thrilled to have you. Please do reach out if you're interested in joining us as a guest. Maybe you'd like to have one of your own shows, or you'd like to co-host with me. You'd like to be part of a panel or a roundtable. Please go over to usaglobaltv.com/contact us. All right, that wraps up our shows up until Talking Heads. You just heard what Red is presenting on. I'm going to go over and produce the show, and I'll be back tomorrow for the rest of our broadcasts. Take care. Bye.